Welcome back to Software Without Borders, where we explore the ever-evolving world of software and its impact on business and industries across the globe. I'm your co-host, Andy Hilliard, CEO of Accelerance, and with me today is my co-host, Rich Wanden, Chief Customer Success Officer at Accelerance.
Well, thank you for having me today, Andy. And today we are thrilled to have our good friend Pete Panagakis with us today. And if you listened to Pete in the first episode that we recorded with him, you'd have known that Pete is a seasoned technology leader with over 20 years experience in software outsourcing and working in businesses. So he's successfully worked in global businesses in various industries like tax, insurance, legal, energy, public sector, healthcare, telecommunications. And in his previous appearance, Pete shared some very valuable insights on building effective, globally distributed teams. And he's also a 4-time customer of Accelerance over many, many years, when we've helped him build teams, different industries, different technology stacks, combinations of such. So it's wonderful to have you here today, Pete, to share with you an updated perspective on how you've effectively leveraged offshore software teams for development and, more importantly, for business transformation and the value you can get out of that.
Yeah, Pete, I'm super excited to have you here. Honestly, not so excited about your Chiefs. You know, you get too many ref calls. I'm just tired. Tired of Mahomes, man. It's like
I hear you. Just give us one more. Just give us one more. That's it. One more.
Okay, for you. But anyway, we're excited to hear your insights on navigating the challenges and opportunities of offshore software development. And yeah, welcome back to the show.
Yep. Hey guys, good to see you. Thanks for having me, and excited about the conversation today. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So Pete, as Rich was saying, you've led global organizations across many diverse industries, and I'd like to hear about some of the common challenges and opportunities you've encountered in leveraging technology to optimize business performance. Can you share some stories and examples?
Sure, you bet. I think from a challenge perspective that most companies struggle at some level with technical debt. It's kind of an evil word in certain companies. No one wants to talk about it. But the reality is most companies have it. Technology's been around long enough now that you don't have to have a mainframe, right, to have technical debt. So we've had to deal with, legacy Microsoft technologies, VB6, things like that. Going back to Fox Pro, DOS systems from the 90s. It's even more current situations where we've leveraged recent Microsoft technology that's been deprecated, and trying to get the business to buy in on an upgrade to improve the technology stack can be really, really challenging. If they feel like they're being successful with the technology they have, it's hard for them to understand all the risks that technical debt can create. And then eventually it leads to workarounds and inefficiency that ultimately cost money. Depletes things like ROI and EBITDA. So, that's something I see fairly consistently, in my role as CIO, CTO of different companies. In terms of opportunities, I think that, there's still a lot of paper out there. I'm just shocked, that the amount of paper pushing that companies are still doing nowadays. Certain industries like healthcare and other areas, it's just very, very paper intensive. So I think, automating those business processes, there's a lot of opportunity there across, I'd say, several markets in a variety of companies. Other opportunities too. I don't think people have really tapped into the power of their data. Big data was a big deal not too long ago. But amazingly, many companies still haven't tapped into it. Being able to make data-driven decisions using analytics to predict or try to describe, what the company's doing, how they're performing and the changes they should make to increase that performance. A lot of companies just aren't there yet.
For sure. I mean, those are some really big areas, and maybe not so much historically, but when you come into a new situation, do you tend to prioritize like the biggest, most general issue might be legacy, or it might be data, or it may be, automation, all of the above. I know you have to deal with all of the above, but have you come in historically like saying, first thing is I need to get my arms wrapped around technical debt, or and I know this is evolving. Maybe you used to do that, or like, what is your typical, hit the ground and assess what the situation is? Where do you typically prioritize things?
That's a great question. I think there's two sides to that question, or the answer to that question. I feel like on the IT side of the fence, I come in and I look and try to determine, how can we scale? Most businesses want to grow. That's the goal, right? To grow the business. And IT needs to scale alongside with the business. So, I look at the technical debt. That's a component of it. But I look at things that, how are teams organized? What disciplines do we have? What disciplines are missing? How can we change the organization to support the business and more importantly, align with the business? Do we have our teams, software teams aligned with product teams, aligned with, sales and marketing, those kinds of things. So I think being able to scale is critically important. Like I said, most, if not all businesses want to grow. And so that's kind of where I start on the IT side of the fence. Now on the business side of the fence, the other side of the answer is, I try to determine, where do we have competitive advantage? I work with business leaders and try to determine, where is that competitive advantage? And, wherever that competitive advantage is where we want to invest. And so if it's eliminating technical debt, happy day, everybody wins. If it's building a new product or offering a new service, then that technical debt, is going to have to wait. It's going to be deprioritized until, those other initiatives are completed. Those higher priority, higher business value initiatives are completed. So that's kind of how I walk into an organization and I look at both sides of it. What's important to the business, and then how can IT, scale and align to support that.
Well, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and something you mentioned earlier, and you've been alluding to ever since, was the alignment of value with spend. What is your framework for that? Like how do you define it, and how do you approach that, and how do you then classify everything you're thinking the organization needs with this whole value spend thing?
It's kind of funny you mentioned that. My approach is pretty straightforward. I like to rent or buy commodity and then, build competitive. And so what I mean by that is if there's a service we can take advantage of, whether it be a SaaS service or a platform as a service that we can leverage, and it's commodity, a ticketing system, right? A CRM. We don't want to build those things. There's experts, out there in the world and products and the whole market, dedicated to that. Let's rent that. It's not going to make us more competitive, right? Our customers aren't going to value that we have, the best internal ticketing system, in the country. So if it's commodity, we rent or we buy. Renting is always, favored. And then, for the competitive things, we got to build it, right? We want to differentiate. We want to be different than those in the market. So we want to bring a technology to the table that, nobody else is doing, or we're doing it better, right? A better mousetrap, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So, Pete, if I can jump in there, I've, over the years have seen a number of sort of areas where you've worked, where you've actually, focusing on the software, building the stuff that gives you competitive advantage. And every time you've gone and done it, I think you've had a really a blended model. You've not done it completely offshore at all, but you've blended the model, leveraging offshore. What's sort of your criteria for what you're looking for when you go offshore to do that, and how do you actually sort of work out that for you that's going to deliver value to the business?
Yeah, I kind of look for weaknesses. I start off with the IT organization, of course. As a CIO, CTO, that's my domain, and so I'll look for weaknesses. And it's not always, do we have enough people? That's not always the problem. Are there gaps? Are there gaps in terms of, specific roles or disciplines that we're missing? In the past, when I was at Imperial PFS, we didn't have a very mature, I'll call it, that's probably the nicest way to put it, quality assurance practice. So the partner that we were looking for had to bring that to the table. It was, critically important. And when I did my partner visit, I actually sat down with the QA leadership to understand how they approach quality assurance and, what were their processes and their tools and their, to really understand their maturity so that they could bring that into the organization. Other things that come to mind is, my current role here at i3 Verticals is we were looking for a big data solution. We had a new product that we were getting ready to take to market. There was a lot of manual work to bring that data and the analytics together, and we wanted to build a data lake and put reporting on top of that. So the partner that we chose, that we're currently leveraging, it was very, very important that they could span multiple technology disciplines, and they had a variety of expertise in various places. The good news is we have a pretty solid quality assurance group and other things, but certain technologies, we just didn't have that capability. So identifying a partner that could fill some of those gaps for us was critically important. And the partner we chose is great. They, like I said, they span multiple technology disciplines, if you will. And we can leverage them and tap them for a variety of different things, not just, the same old saying, .NET development or Java development, things like that.
Right. Yeah. And then on top of that, of course, you've also had a very strong background around infrastructure and modernization of infrastructure and moving things into the cloud. Tell us how you've worked with that in combination offshore as well, using both your teams here and there.
Sure. Once it goes back to kind of filling gaps. We've had, for instance, our current infrastructure here at i3 Verticals. We have a fairly significant deployment to AWS. We built that practice internally, and we have a lot of resources with expertise. Azure is a little bit different story for us. It's a little more distributed right now across the company. We're working to consolidate and bring all that our Azure presence under kind of one umbrella. But a lot of the work has been done, traditionally by developers, right, who are not, Azure cloud engineers. And so, specifically for Azure, we've tapped, offshore resources to help us, complement, I guess, our organization or and build out that discipline within i3 Verticals. So it really kind of goes to, where do we have expertise, and where do we need to bring in, additional help, and yeah.
It's a good way of doing it, and an efficient way of doing it.
Hey, Pete, it's not too often that we get both a CIO and a CTO, in the same person. And you mentioned your CTO role at i3 Verticals and your CIO role at Imperial PFS, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you have a lot of experiences before that. I'd like to hear a little bit about your own evolution in terms of CIO, CTO, and also what you've learned over the years and maybe more recently, as far as what's important for the functional skill set. What have you learned? What have you sort of gone away from, and what are you gravitating towards in terms of? And you mentioned some of that before, but I just like to hear, one, the dual role aspect, and two, sort of what you're focusing on more today and less in the past.
Oh, sure. When I stepped into the CIO role, the focus is really about managing internal resources, managing budgets, keeping at least internal technology current, reducing risk to the organization. The revenue components, although we leveraged technology for revenue opportunities, it really didn't drive our revenue. We were a financial services company ultimately. Specifically, we were in the lending space. So the technology helped complement the business, and it obviously helped streamline certain things, but it wasn't the driver of the revenue. So a lot of the focus was, creating those internal efficiencies and looking for ways to, to reduce expense, or, do more, as I always say, do more with the same, or sometimes more with less. Transforming into the CTO role. We're a software company, right? So all of our technology is customer facing. We have customers that, span the country in a variety of areas in public sector, whether it be state governments, public utility, justice tech, court systems. We have customers everywhere. So, the focus isn't necessarily on, how do I optimize this internal department? The focus is really, what can we bring to the market? How can we differentiate? How can we bring things to the market more efficiently? We prioritize, configuration over customization now, something that's, critically important to us, because we have, when you're working on internal systems and internal technology, you ultimately have one customer. Yeah, that one internal customer may serve lots of external customers, but it's one, product. And so therefore you can customize it the way you want it. But when we're serving multiple markets and multiple customers, we're having to change the way that we look at, building software. We have to do it a little bit differently. So looking at that configuration over customization is key. Looking at trends in the market. Right now, we're starting to dig into AI to see if there's opportunities both internally and externally to leverage AI. I'm also very wary, though, and I've seen technologies kind of come and go. Not to pick on Microsoft, but they've kind of been through the gamut of the next new thing. From their old web forms technology back in the early 2000s to Silverlight, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, and a lot of their the things kind of come and go. The same is true maybe of blockchain, right? It was going to solve world hunger at one point in time. And low code environments, all those kinds of things, they can be really trendy. So you just got to be really careful where you, where you invest, because you don't want to, if at all possible, you don't want to create a massive amount of technical debt, in a very short period of time.
If you could separate the company from the role on a personal basis, which role gives you more satisfaction? And why?
No, I do like the chief technology officer role. I've always, to me, it's about the way I see it. It's about solving problems for customers at the end of the day. And since I was very young, I love to use technology to make people's lives easier. And I love the CTO role because it's a variety of products that it can really impact a lot of customers in a very meaningful way. So I love leveraging the technology to create a better customer experience, allowing people to actually, maybe enjoy their job a little bit more, maybe get a little more free time, some of that work-life balance that we can miss at times.
So if someone offered you twice as much money to be a CIO?
Honestly, Andy, I'm at a point in my career.
Ask the question, man.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's really not all about the money anymore. I think it's about, just reached a point in my career, I think there's another layer there. It's like a personal satisfaction, right? Am I creating value? Am I doing things that are meaningful? And I think in my current role, I've achieved that. More so than maybe any other role in my career.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool. I'm glad we all reach a point where we need to be true to ourselves. And obviously, we have different priorities and everyone has different needs and different external things that are sometimes driving their habits. And we can't all do what we purely are selfish to do. So, but anyway,
exactly.
Hey, let me just switch gears real quick. When you see these internal technology teams and you're developing these unique solutions for clients, how do you create an environment of innovation and how do you maintain alignment with the company goals?
That's an interesting question. It can be really challenging. No company wants to. I mean, so I'm used to working in the mid-cap, mid-size companies, right? So we don't have R&D budgets. Maybe you're large cap, Google's, Meta, whoever. They've got budgets for R&D, and but our size company, we really don't have that. So we have to be a little creative in how we chase those innovative technologies. I try to find a fit, most importantly, like a business need. Somewhere where we can bring something to the customer they didn't have before. There's some AI technologies that we're looking at in the public sector space right now that we're training machines to read documents and streamline the document collection and import process. And so we've leveraged some Azure technology to do the document reading for us. We've done our proof of concept, and so I think that's the secret right there, is the proof of concept. That's how we get the innovative work done. See something, we see a problem, Now, I have a small team that stays very in tuned to current technology. We meet on a regular basis. It's our architectural review board, and people bring ideas to the table. We vet them out, and if the technology looks viable, then we try to align it, somewhere with the business problem. It doesn't always work out. There's a lot of tech, that it just doesn't have a fit right now. But it definitely goes in the file cabinet for future reference.
Mm-hmm. Now, Pete, I'm curious. I know you you didn't scoot over it, but we cannot move off probably what's the biggest topic of the decade, if not the century, which is course AI. You said before, you're starting to look at it, and I don't think you're the only one who's starting to look at it, and I think there's a lot of not so much trepidation, but what is the way forward? What's the right bet? People sort of making those decisions. Tell us about tell us a little bit more detail, maybe without spilling the beans on anything strategic or secret about, what you're struggling with finding an answer to. Because from my point of view, and we see this a lot, and you're a portfolio company, people are spending an awful lot of money doing stuff that's already proven, or they're spending an awful lot of money duplicating stuff. So how do you cut through that, and what are you struggling with?
Once again, in the spirit of two answers for every question, I would say on the product side, the good news for our company is we just hired a very talented chief product officer who's very, very much in tune with the market and our customers. So leveraging, senior product people like that, and looking for those opportunities in the market, that's a great start. Prior to his arrival, we created a handful of use cases that we thought would be valuable. But it's been a challenge, right, to get the buy-in because we're just IT, right? We're just IT. And so, but having being able to partner with a CPO that has that kind of vision is going to really help, drive us to market with a lot of those technologies. So the use cases we're looking at, some are very viable, some are more, just kind of nice to have to say we're in, we're in the space. The other answer to your question is kind of more internally, right? How can we leverage, we're a software company, right? And so you look at Google and Meta and these other groups, and they're talking about how, AI is going to be driving a lot of their development going forward. And a lot of them make, all sorts of claims, 25%, 30% AI driven, or we're not hiring this year, we're just going to leverage AI. Those are great. Those are interesting claims. If for companies of their size where they have the R&D budget, they can build their own AI platforms to drive their technology, that's great. For companies like, our size, we don't have that budget. We don't have that, access to those resources, if you will. So we're looking at, what tools are there in the marketplace and how mature are they? There's two sides of AI that we're looking at currently in software engineering. One side is the generative AI. So it's, tools that plug into our integrated development environments that can suggest, blocks of code or, maybe even a little bit more than that, where engineers, can then review, correct, and deploy. We're looking at maybe, unit tests, things like that can be generated by AI. We just bought a plugin within our Jira system that can now use generative AI to create release notes. So we're looking to create efficiencies kind of maybe at the more micro level there. On the other side of the AI, I guess a trend is the agentic AI. And this is what the big players are building. The good news is for the smaller players, there are tools out there that are up and coming. So we're looking at very specific tools that, within the custom IDE that they built, the integrated development environment, they've got these agentic AI tools, these bots that you can spin up and they can actually create, potentially entire applications. We're right now we're just in the discovery stage. What I would say about that is, I don't think the bots will replace the software engineers, but it'll just change the way the software engineers do their jobs. I was reviewing one of the platforms in particular, just kind of watching a video on it and watching the guy, configure the system, configure the AI. And at the end of the day, it's programming. He's writing code to build the bot. The good news is that bot then can build bigger things, right? And so software engineering, I don't think is going to go away, but it will definitely evolve or morph into probably something different as AI becomes more, more present, more popular, and more available.
Oh yeah, we can definitely see there being much more creative software engineers using those tools. And to your point, we've got clients who've told us point blank that they don't need to hire any more engineers this year due to attrition because of what they've gained in productivity with from requirements definition and refining those really simply using tools through the testing side of it. Those two areas, when I was working just configuring SAP systems, that was a pain in the neck. Oh, I've got to do the requirements. I've got to write this down. Well, playing with this stuff, they spit out in minutes. That. And they're pretty damn good as a start. You've got to refine them, but there's phenomenal opportunity there. And it's interesting you're talking about the agentic AI. I was reading two pieces this week. One was from a report out of Deloitte, one of the recent ones on state of AI, and McKinsey, and they're both going into reasonable detail about the potential for And sometimes you wonder if it's science fiction, but the potential for that sort of agentic AI to be creating software.
Yeah. That's it's funny. I worked with an engineering leader in the past. A guy worked for me, and he said, at the end of the day, developers are extremely lazy. And what he meant by that is if they have to do something manual once, they're going to write code to do it, the next 1,000 times. And this is the ultimate laziness, right? This is like, not only do I not have to write the code, I just get to tell the bot how to write the code, And so I think the software engineers will embrace that. I don't think they should feel threatened. It's just going to be a different kind of fun, right? If that's what you're into. Hey, Rich, if you don't mind me asking, just real quick. So you mentioned other clients. Are you seeing the same thing? Like the mid-cap, mid-sized companies that they're looking to leverage tools, or do you see that they're that they're building their own things and trying to build their own bot generators, if you will?
No one doing anything crazily expensive and excessive. Some of the portfolio people we work with are looking across portfolios to sort of say, right, you can experiment there. No one else do it until we've proven something. That I've seen a couple of times as a corporate mandate in the last couple of years. I'm not seeing anybody sort of stuck in a rut of not getting anywhere with a large scale multi-million-dollar project. But in terms of the engineering practices, what that's doing to internal software teams, I see a lot of work going on there where everyone's saying, look, we're getting benefit out of doing this, substantial benefit, efficiencies and quality. And I was talking to someone last week just about, I'm looking at code, and you can see that, certain engineers have written almost the same routines different ways. And it's like, let's stamp this out by reviewing the code and standardizing it. Now, in days have gone by, that technical debt would have been zero ranked priority. You would not have done that. And you just let the thing run. Now, from a quality perspective, people are saying, hey, we can do this and extremely quickly. So those sorts of opportunities, it's, for me, it's fascinating. It's not that we're not going to need engineers. It's that we're going to have engineers who produce much better product. It's almost by numbers.
Do you spend more of your time, or do you expect to spend more of your time both quantifying the benefits of emergent technology and AI, and also setting expectations with stakeholders as far as what they can expect, what is actually happening, what benefits are accruing, and what they can expect down the road? Because I imagine that a lot of stakeholders are saying, I can write an email and 99 times faster, and so shouldn't my cost of development go down by 2/3 tomorrow, and speed to market, this and that. I mean, so you're probably having to set expectations and at the same time deliver and communicate benefits that are actually being seen. Because otherwise people are like, what is it? Just, I see all this AI, and aren't you guys doing the same old, same old? It's like, we're not doing the same old. We're doing things better. We're doing things faster. And this is what it is. And this is what you can expect down the road.
That's right. I think, I am. The answer is yes, I am. I spend a lot of time, or, especially recently, quantifying the value and the benefit. And like you said, it's not necessarily saying, should we do it, but it's more like you said, managing the expectations of, it's not going to replace, we're not going to be run by bots. We're going to need people. Now, those people may be more efficient. They may be, like I said, higher quality, in terms of the code that we're generating, the code that we're testing. I'm fortunate that I work with, a lot of our business leaders, they were small business owners at one time. So they're that entrepreneurial mindset, and they're always looking for like that next best thing, because that's just how they're wired. And so very fortunate from that perspective. But on the other side of the coin is, well, we're not the small business, we're a mid-sized company now. So we have to do things that are right for a company of our size. So managing those expectations, that when AI creates the efficiency, what do we do with that efficiency? The good news for us is we're growing rapidly. We're getting into, new markets, new jurisdictions, especially in our public sector space. And so it seems like every quarter we're having to go find new engineers, and that's
why is that?
Oh, just because new opportunities, new projects, new products, new things coming to market, and maybe a small team, maybe a large team, but we're, every time we want to go build something, we got to get people to do it. And so I think ultimately what's going to happen is we'll create the efficiencies leveraging AI. And when we want to go build that new thing, we may want to, skinny back the other team, right? Take that efficiency and apply it somewhere else. Now, the key there, though, is, you can't just bring the tools in. AI is like every other tool, right? You can't bring the tool in, expect it to solve the problem. You got to have the right people, in the right seats, the right level of accountability, right level of expertise, knowledge, all those kinds of things. And just as important, you got to have the process. If you don't have the people in the process, the tool is probably going to fail. So before we can even think about measuring, or before we think about gaining efficiency, we have to be able to measure it. And that comes out of our processes, right? So being able to measure team velocity, being able to measure, code quality, things like that. If we can get a baseline and then apply the AI, then we can see exactly, the efficiency we're creating and know how to apply those resources maybe elsewhere across the company.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Pete, this wouldn't be an accelerants podcast unless we were talking about doing it globally.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a captive center, an i3 Verticals captive center in India.
Yep.
And when you're talking about, adoption of these tools and processes, tell us a little bit about that experience, how that's been going for you. Because, again, you've got a couple of hundred people up there now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the captive center, obviously one of the strengths is, we have the management oversight, 100%, control. And, we can, apply resources, wherever we think it's appropriate. So the control side is wonderful. The expense side is also, there's an upside to from an expense perspective. But, when you're talking about technology and people and, and development, it's not all about, the money. Some of the challenges we have is, we have to deal with the things that our partners have to deal with. First and foremost, the market that we're in is limited, right? We're not in one of the major, technology markets in the world. Great people, don't get me wrong, and great technologists, right? We just don't have access to the breadth of technology that you might get in other markets. So that's some of the challenges we face. That's where we look to partners to leverage, relationships there to bring some of those, those things to the table. We have to deal with all the attrition and all the, the onboarding process. We're doing good, but it's very challenging. Culturally, right? The culture with our captive group is, they have different requirements, different holidays, different traditions, time away from work, things like that have also been, a little challenging for us. Where if you leverage a partner that maybe works in, multiple global locations, you can overcome some of that. So, like I said, the partner that we've leveraged with you most recently, they're all over the world, and they bring all sorts of technology to the table. We could tap them for all sorts of things, whether it be cloud or big data or .NET development. So for us, having a global partner, at least in our hip pocket, is always going to be critical.
Got it. And when you spoke about hiring a new product manager into the firm recently, again, for me, just looking around at, this whole sort of reinvention of products with the advent of AI. So when we're talking to customers now about just scoping out and estimating what it might take for a legacy transformation, right? There's a huge set of possibilities that may not have been there a couple of years ago to incorporate AI. So the these aren't foundational upgrades that people seem to be talking about. What are you seeing in your business in terms of any of your legacy for transformation and from you're driving it from a product perspective first, of course.
Sure. I think there's, AI is a piece of the transformation process for sure. We have right now we're looking at we have a technology that is a little dated, and it's mostly UI UX work that needs to be done. The APIs, the back end are current. There's no issue there. So we're going to look to, one of these AI tools that can maybe, comb through the AI or through the UI, right? And understand all of the, the legacy code that's in place and generate, new Angular code for us or whichever platform we choose or whichever technology stack we choose. I think there's a real opportunity there, which would be huge, right? So then it comes down to developers going in and refining it, And then obviously the quality assurance component. And what I'd say there too is, my initial thought, a couple of months ago was, let's bring in a third party UI UX group. They can come in, they can build a new, a app for us, the front end for us, and then we'll find a way to deploy it, over time that's not disruptive to our customers. But because of AI, we can go a lot faster. We can point the bot at it, get rocking and rolling, get through quality assurance, and we might be able to do a big bang cutover even. We may be able to move that fast. So we'll see what that brings to the table. But the other thing I like to say about transformation as well is, sometimes you have to leave things in place. We have some technologies that maybe aren't super, it's not a very competitive space for us. They're meeting the need of the customer, right? But we still have that technical debt to deal with. So we've gotten creative there as well. We've encapsulated them into virtual desktop environments, and then we deploy the virtual desktop environments from the cloud. So we're still be able to get everything to the cloud. So we have the management, the oversight, security, high availability, all the benefits of the cloud with these, what we call a thick client app, right? And then deploy it via either app virtualization or virtual desktop. We've done virtual desktops. And that's another way we've dealt with some of this technical debt. It's customers not complaining. They're good with it. It's not maybe a very competitive product. But it's, most companies that work on our space have it. So we want to stay competitive enough, right? And so rather than a very expensive rewrite or you're trying to apply AI to it, we'll just encapsulate it into a virtual desktop, and we'll get that, that centralized management oversight we're looking for.
Hey, Pete, now I've been working with you since 2014, 2013, 12, or something like that. I mean, so 10, 15 years. And it's amazing the evolution you've taken. I mean, when we first started working together at Epic, legal services, technology-enabled legal services company, and the use of offshoring was, I guess, embryonic at the time. And of course, most companies that haven't done it before gravitate towards nearshore because same time zones, cultural alignment, proximity, I guess. And, you guys ramped up a team of 50 people then at Epic. And over the next 10 years, you've evolved to managing a captive and several partners in different time zones for different specializations. And, I can tell the amount of both experiences and confidence you've had at leveraging people domestically, internationally, and for very specific purposes, risk mitigation purposes, not having all your eggs in one basket. That's a pretty impressive evolution over a relatively short period of time. And then now you throw in, AI as sort of a new partner that is going to enable or empower all the other partnerships and your whole function. So obviously you're not bored.
No, definitely not bored. No, and it's been quite an evolution, like you say. I had some early experiences as a developer working with an offshore group. Early 2000s in my career, and it was a larger company. I worked for HR Block at the time, and they weren't afraid. Big company, they weren't afraid to take some chances. They had the they had the ability. So we leveraged an Indian group, and that was my first experience. And so I guess I was kind of lucky from that perspective because I knew how successful it could be. Then you start working with smaller companies, mid-sized companies, and there's always that fear. I don't know who's working on my code. I don't know what they're doing and what's happening to my IP and all these concerns that, maybe a small to mid-sized company would have that a larger company, has already kind of put behind them. So that was a challenging phase. And I think most companies at this point in time have accepted the fact that we have, a global workforce or a global technology workforce, and to not leverage or tap into it some way or another, just doesn't make any sense. And so, it's safe to stay in the same time zone. It's safe to say, whatever safe means to you. But, I think ultimately at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's about building the relationships, having a proper level of, collaboration. Specific roles have to be in place, for things to work. You got to have delivery managers, your team leads have to work, directly with, the developers that are anywhere in the world. You got to set time aside, for daily sprints, for check-ins, things like that. If it's a time zone alignment problem, depending on the organization, or I've always worked in a blended organization. Having some sort of overlap is, critically important. So, we're fortunate we get, a good 4 hours a day of overlap. That's, half a day of overlap. That works out, really well. I've been in the other side of the coin where there was no overlap. And, early in my career, I tried this experiment. It was a total disaster. Dev would write code during the day and QA would test at night. Total and complete disaster for so many reasons. The processes weren't tight. There wasn't enough overlap that if a build failed, QA would lose an entire day. It wasn't very collaborative. It was us and them. And so learned some of those lessons early on. But, building the relationships, building that rapport, trying to, the site visit's critically important.
I mean, see, this is what you've evolved because, at first, you like most companies, even today, they look at this thing as pure labor or cost arbitrage. And obviously, they don't get the full value of the arbitrage because now they're dealing with time zones and cultures and language, and they're very transactional. It's like, do this for the same as I used to do it, but for half the price. And they never get that value. And there's so many more elements to value. And you're hitting upon a bunch of these things as far as, empowerment and collaboration and getting to know one another on a personal basis, and then segmenting different types of activities based on, the different group or the different location. And so you're thinking about all these other elements beyond just a price point. Frankly, if you're just treating this as a commoditized transaction, then you're no different than anyone else, any other of your competitors or any other company. They're doing the same thing too, and they all have a lot of inefficiencies. You're just upping your game and saying, the most value I can create is not just from transactional labor and cost arbitrage. It's about creating an environment that supports one another and is truly holistic and not two binary entities getting activities done.
That's exactly right. And the tooling that's available today, it's just so much better than it was 15 years ago, right? And everybody's got some sort of Teams or something on their desktop, right? And you can reach out and touch somebody, halfway across the world, just like that. There they are, and you can see them, and which is wonderful. And so whether you're doing, like a daily sprint, and you have some sort of conference room set up with a camera, and the global team is here and the domestic team is there, and however you want to do it, but you can create a closeness, and with just by leveraging those kinds of technologies. And I know it's a little maybe overdone, but COVID really did teach us, this remote work was very much possible. Now I think it did come with a price, I think it did. We're back in the office, and there's a lot of aspects I like about being back in the office for sure. But it did give us, the tools and the technology and the capacity to work anywhere, right? And that means anywhere in the globe. So I guess that was the upside, but I think it's a little overplayed sometimes too.
No.
Yeah.
It's become very important to figure out what that operating model needs to look like for you before you go out finding the right partner.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And we see that it's not thought through
Rich,
sometimes.
that cannot be emphasized enough.
Yeah.
Yep. And we touched on it earlier too. It's really understanding your organization, right? And I'm starting to even look at, outside my organization now, I'm starting to hear of, certain business problems that we have, and I, for instance, accounts payable, right? They've got, some challenges with staffing. It's like, hey, we can bring in a global partner to help with that, or, you're even like sales support, things like that, not just customer service, but actual real sales support. We can find partners to do this work for us, right? Or to work with us, I should say, and so, yeah, I would say I've evolved even, where I'm looking at, global partnerships, even outside of IT, because there's a lot to be offered out there. And it's not about the dollars, Andy, you're right. I mean, I think that's a huge mistake. I worked for a leader in the past who, that's all he was focused on was the dollars, but if the partner doesn't, share, some of the same values, if you don't understand their culture, they don't understand yours. If they don't fill certain gaps for you, whether it be, process gaps or roles, things like that. If you don't consider all those pieces, you're probably not going to be successful, and you definitely won't be as successful as you possibly could be.
I'm still fixated on this. You get it. And a lot of CTOs we talk to, strategically and holistically get it, but they are hamstrung by the expectations and maybe definitions of stakeholders that say like, just get it done. And this, outsourcing is half the price of this, and just get it done. And you're trying to describe to them, like not to put the cart before the horse and what needs to happen in order to really create a machine that can create exponential value over time. But they're kind of fixated on, but just get this thing done and half the price tomorrow. And I'm like, that's like you can do that, but where does that lead you? Are you improving? No, you're not. If you're just in this loop of transactional,
And what other problems are you creating, right? By doing that, you're going to be creating, other problems, whether it be logistics problems or timing or, just cultural problems within your organization, the partner organization, just to look at it, with such a small-minded perspective just doesn't make any sense.
What advice do you give to CTOs that feel like they're between a rock and a hard place?
Man, I would say, you just got to continue to educate your business leaders. You have to really explain to them, demonstrate to them why all these other facets, right, of global partnerships are important. It's challenging. I'm very blessed right now. I'm lucky that, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our business leaders are, they came from these smaller businesses, entrepreneurial, so they've been there in the trenches, fighting the bad implementation or the bad software release, or they've been, there with the customer, yelling it, in their face, after, something went south from a technology perspective. So I'm very lucky from that perspective. So they get it. They know it's more than just, slinging code or whatever problem you're trying to solve. So I would just, I think, one thing that I'm working on right now, specific to AI, because AI is kind of like the next gen of outsourcing, right? So one thing I'm trying to do is make sure everybody, all the business leaders understand what the engineering process looks like. And I've got working with some of the guys on my team here to put together some presentations so they really understand the engineering process. It's not like you hire a guy to write some code and then you got software, right? I mean, there's a level of collaboration that has to take place between the business, between product owners, quality assurance, software engineering. There's design considerations. There's, you want to create things that are reusable, easy to read, and that there's the whole testing aspect, the unit testing, functional testing, regression testing, test plans, test case. So there's all these things that go into the engineering process that, maybe that'd be my advice to other CTOs is to make sure that your business partners really understand the engineering process and that it is a process and that it's, half art, half science. And you can't just pay someone less and expect to have great results. You really have to, where do they plug into the process? How are they going to complement, areas, where maybe you're weak and they can make you stronger?
I concur with that, Pete. And I think, often really what it comes down to is expectations are just not met because right in the beginning, the compromises, the trades, the things you have to get right to make that offshore model work aren't thought through, aren't realized. And a little bit of that goes a long way to people working the process well and actually getting benefit from it. And so I totally agree with you, but enough from me.
Hey, well, Pete, we're so fortunate to have you on this podcast because, and I don't mean that just generically speaking, because the amount of experience you have also between being a CIO and a CTO, from outsourcing shared services to software development, now integrating AI, captives, partners, specialization. I mean, you have so much experience in over a period of time. And the whole goal of this podcast is to, have both aspiring professionals that will eventually, do what you've done, but they can do it in a condensed format. They don't need to make all the mistakes. Everyone will make mistakes, but they can see some things by learning something from someone like you. Hopefully you won't be inundated with people, calling you and picking your brain, because I know you have a day job and stuff.
Sure. But, I don't mind helping people. I love it. I love to help. That's kind of just, I guess it's, part of my nature, right? Solving problems, helping people. But let me go right back at both you guys and say, it's been an incredible relationship after the last 14 years or whatever it's been, and you brought some really great partners to the table, and you've educated me too as well. Initially it was I've told the story before, but we did the engagement at Epic with you, and I went on to a very small web development shop called Blue Ocean Consulting. And I'm like, great, I'm going to call that partner up. I'm going to bring him in. We're going to get busy, And I'm like, a little something in the back of the brain said, you better call Andy. And so I called Andy, and, you educated me. You said, listen, that was a great partner for you in that company, but you're in a different role, different size company. You guys have different values, different culture. I suggest you go through the process. I suggest you interview, you review, you score, grade, whatever you want to say. And you found a great partner for us there. And we would have failed, right? Because no two companies are alike. We would have failed miserably if we hadn't gone through that process. So whenever I'm looking for something, and this isn't a sales pitch for everybody watching out there, but whenever I'm looking for something, I need to do something globally. I know there's a process. I know you guys are experts, and I'll definitely tap you, and we'll look for how you can fill the need, if you will.
I mean, that's one last thing to that point, and that is, especially engineers or people with engineering minds, they always want to choose a critical path to a solution, and they tend to jump a little bit too quickly without stopping and understanding that this situation is new. It requires some time to go through it, and because you may come up with a different solution. Just don't jump to what you think worked for you last time, because the new situation is always different. So, hey, to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Software Without Borders. If you're interested in learning more about agile methodologies, remote team optimization, or the latest trends in software development, be sure to subscribe to our show and leave only a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting platform.